Hi class, this week I want to get you started in the HTML tutorial at codecademy.com. What I want to do before you start that tutorial is I want to talk about some terminology that you'll need to know for the rest of the class. So I'm going to talk a little bit about HTML and what it is, and in order to do that there's a couple key terms that I have to discuss, and then I want to show you how websites work, and then we're going to get more specific into HTML. So some key terms that you'll need for this class: domain and hosting. If you read through the syllabus like you were supposed to, you saw these words in there because you actually will be purchasing a domain and hosting for this class. It'll cost you about $20 to $30. Now, a domain is the name of a website. So, for example, bsu.edu, that's a domain. You should expect to pay about $6 to $15 a year to register your domain. Now, the domain works very similar to how the FCC controls radio stations. If you're familiar with the FCC, you know that they manage call numbers, so you can't have competing businesses in the same town trying to use 91.3 or something like that, because it's going to jam the signal. You know, some people will get one, some people will get the other. It has to be consistent. So domains work the same way. There's an international registry, ICANN, and you have to register your domain name. You have to say that it's, you know, who it belongs to. You kind of put your name on it for a year, or, you know, in year increments. And you pay for the right to have that name and to have it associated with your website. And the other thing that you need to know about is hosting. So domain is literally just the name, meganmcnames.com, bsu.edu. Hosting is where the site files actually live. So the files of code and the pictures and the videos, whatever else you have on your website, those actually have to go on a computer somewhere, and then the domain name has to get connected to it. So it's a bit like a home address. If you live at 909 West University, you have to have a post office. You know, when you move there, you fill something out with the post office, letting the post office know who you are and letting them know that that address is associated with you at a certain physical location. Same with domain and hosting. Your files for your website are actually going to go live on a computer somewhere, and the domain has to be associated with that computer. So with hosting, you rent that space. So I kind of simplify it and I say that your files live on a computer somewhere, but it's a little more complicated than that because data can be broken down into smaller bits. A lot of times your files are not on one computer, they're actually spread across many computers, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just imagine that instead of being spread, they're just sitting on one computer. So you're renting the space for that computer. If you have Dropbox, that's exactly what you're doing. You're getting space on a computer somewhere, and when you put your files on Dropbox, they're going to that computer and they're staying there. And that's how you can access them from anywhere, because any computer you sit on, you can log in, and those Dropbox will connect you to that computer elsewhere where your files are, and you'll be able to see them and to make changes to them. Now, Dropbox isn't set up to host websites. It's just set up to hold files. But hosting companies that sell, or, you know, they're basically renting you space on a computer, they set those computers up so that you can put websites on them. And in that case, they're called servers. So a server is a type of computer. It's like, we'll look at a picture in the next slide. It's like a computer with no monitor on it, and it's specifically set up to have websites on it. So hosting, you're renting space to put your website files on a computer somewhere outside of where you physically are, that is going to be your website. So let's look at this in sort of a drawing form. So here's how code works. The user opens a browser, which is a special program for accessing the internet. As you all know, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Safari, these are all browsers. The user types in the domain. So they type in the name of where they want to go, bsu.edu. And what happens is the browser looks up information about who owns bsu.edu and what computer are they supposed to direct the browser to get files to make the website happen. So the browser connects to the host, which is the computers where the files are stored. And this is a picture of a server farm. It's just lots and lots and lots of computers stacked on racks that are all connected that hold files. These are typically in giant warehouses. They're just giant warehouses full of servers. So the browser You give the browser the domain name. The browser looks up the domain name to figure out what computer, where in the world it's supposed to go. It goes to those servers and it accesses the specific part of the server that your name is attached to, your domain name is attached to, and it pulls up the code, or there's usually multiple files of code like this one that you see here that make up a site. There's also pictures, videos, any other assets that you have that are not code, and it pulls all of that up. And what it does is the browser reads and executes the code. So the browser looks at that code that you're seeing here, and the code is just instructions about what the website is supposed to look like and what the website is supposed to do. So where's the logo? Is it in the top left corner or is it in the top right corner? Is it along the side? Where's the menu? Is it across the top? Is it across the side? What are the buttons in the menu? The code generates all of that. The code is all instructions that tell the browser what the website's supposed to look like and what it's supposed to do. So the browser reads that code and it executes it and takes all the code and does what the code says, which results in an actual website. So here you see the bsu.edu website. And then the browser shows that to the user on their computer. So those are the steps of looking at a website. You type in the name, your browser connects to the host, it gets the files, it reads and executes the files, and in doing that converts the files into a visual display with behaviors and shows that to the user. Now, this is how you're used to experiencing websites. This is what we call Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which you all recognize. HTTP or HTTPS is just Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. And when you type in HTTP, that's telling the browser that you want to execute the code. So that's telling the browser, I want you to go get the files, but I don't want to see the files. I want to see what the files make. I want you to read and do the instructions, not just show me the instructions. That's HTTP. There's actually another type of connection that we're going to be using in this class called FTP, File Transfer Protocol. So in this type of protocol, instead of telling the browser that you want to look at the, connect to the host and get the files and execute it and do whatever the code says to do, you actually want to look at the code itself. And you can do this in the browser, but for this class, we're going to do this with what's called an FTP client. So this week, you're going to have to secure on your own computer an FTP client. I suggest CyberDuck, the logo with the little duck. It's pretty simple. It's the simplest one I've seen. FileZilla is fine too, but it's a little more complicated if you're new to this stuff. If you're on Ball State's campus and you want to use a library computer or Department of Journalism computer, you're going to use Fetch, which is this little dog running with the file in its mouth. So that's available at Ball State already on the computers. And in this type of protocol, you do almost the same thing as HTTP. You type in the domain name, but you give a username and password. The client connects to the host, so it goes to the server. It pulls the files, but instead of reading the files and doing what the files say, it just grabs the files and then it shows you the files. So you can see here, instead of seeing a website, the user is seeing a list of the files that make up the site. So it could be pictures, it could be pieces of code, it could be videos, whatever makes the site happen, you're just going to see those files instead of actually executing the website and seeing what the files make. And those are going to be shown to you. So let's look at a quick example. I'm just going to use my portfolio because I'm able to log into it on both methods. So if I type in http www.meganmcnames.com, you'll see that the browser is going to go to my hosting, which I rent, and it's going to pull the files and it's going to execute them. So you see my files being executed, you're seeing the pictures being pulled up, you're seeing the code doing what it's supposed to do, all here. Now, if I open CyberDuck, which is an FTP client, I'm going to make an FTP connection instead of an HTTP. So you can see right here it says FTP, File Transfer Protocol, and I'm going to type in the name of my website, and I'm going to type in a username and password, which of course you want because you don't want anybody to just be able to look at your code and make changes to it. I'm going to connect. It's going to warn me that it's not secure because I don't have any encryption really happening here. And you'll see that I'm now logged into my server. Now, I've had this server for several years, so every website I've ever made pretty much is on here, so it looks really confusing. But one of those websites is meganmcnames.com. So I'm going to open the folder with meganmcnames.com, and you'll see these are the files that make up my website. So what you're seeing here, if I right-click and I copy the image URL, you'll see that the URL is meganmcnames.com/assets/img for images/creative/about. So I can go into my FTP and I can click on assets, and then I can click on img, and then creative, and there's an about.ping. So if I look at that, it's going to be the same picture. And I could open this in Photoshop and make changes to it if I wanted to. And if I did open this in Photoshop and make changes, then it would actually change it on my website, because I'm changing the files that are currently active to make my website look the way it does. So that's the difference between HTTP and FTP. So this week when you take your HTML tech test, you're going to take some files of HTML and you're going to put them on your own hosting, which for this week we're going to use Ball State's hosting, so it'll be free for you. And you're going to upload them so that you'll bring a website into existence. And you're actually going to use the same theme that I used for my portfolio. Okay, so how does HTML work into all of this? Well, HTML is sort of the basic code that builds the web. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and hypertext is text that's clickable. So back when the web was first being invented, this was really revolutionary. You could take, it used to be that you could put text on the web, you would put text on your server and you could show that to the world, and it was like showing a document. But somebody invented the idea of hypertext, where you could actually make text that's clickable. So you could have buttons, or you could have pictures that you click that get larger. And this, of course, opened up lots of possibilities. So hypertext is, hypertext, text that's hyper, that's active. So text that's clickable. And markup language just means language to mark up content and tell it what to do, what to look like, or where to go. If you are in English or journalism, you're probably familiar with copy editing, and there's a specific markup language for copy editing. For example, if you put a line through a letter, that means one thing. If you put a circle like this through a letter, that means another. If you want to inject a comma, you put this mark, like an upside down V, and then you write the comma underneath. That's a markup language. Hypertext markup language is the same idea. You're just taking the content you want to put on your website, and then you're marking it up. So you're adding things to it to tell the browser what you want it to look like. So let's look at a couple examples. I'm going to come back to this one. So you may recognize this from MySpace, and I think we're kind of passing the time at which this is helpful, but it used to be that I could ask in class, how many of you remember MySpace? And people would remember HTML from MySpace, because you used to be able to use some really basic HTML in MySpace. There might be other programs you guys use, or other websites you guys use that do this as well. So the most basic type of HTML are things like bold and italicized. Just taking a sentence and making it bold or making it italicized. So if we have the sentence, this sentence is about cats, if we just put that in our website file and put it online, it'll just say this is a sentence about cats in a computery typeface. But if we put a B tag on either end of it, then the sentence becomes bold. So if our code looks like this, the visitors to our website see this. And the way HTML works is it has these little carets. And I'm not going to go into this too much because your Code Academy tutorial is going to go over this. But these little carets mean that this is part of the HTML code. This is a piece of markup, so it's different parts of the language. B for bold, I for italic. It gets more complicated than that. And this means end. So again, you'll go over this. We can make this sentence italicized instead by putting italics tags around the sentence, and we can get a little more complicated. We can create links by putting link tags around the sentence and turn the sentence into a link. So at its most basic, this is HTML, and it tells the content what to do. Is it a list or not a list? Is it bold or not bold? Is it clickable or not clickable? So It's really used to tell content sort of where it goes, whether it's first, second, or third in the order, some basic design, like if it's bold or italicized. The main element of HTML is the div, which you're going to get to in your Code Academy tutorial, and that's a box in which you put content to separate it from other kinds of content. You can remember div as division or divider. So if we look at the Ball State website, at its most basic level, it's just a bunch of rectangles stacked on top of each other, and each rectangle has something different in it. So the first has a menu, the second has a logo, the third has another menu, the fourth has a slider, the fifth has blog posts, the sixth has a little table of posts. So at its most basic, websites are just collections of rectangles, and that's why we tend to see a lot of rectangular design used in websites. Your tutorial this week will require you to go into a set website that's already designed and take some of the divs out to get rid of some of the areas of content.